Hey everyone. So, if you're a founder or you're running ops at a fast growing startup, you know this feeling. The payroll system that was your best friend on day one, well, it's starting to feel like it's holding you back. Today, we're going to talk about that exact moment when you realize you've outgrown Gusto and you have to figure out what's next. So, let's just cut right to it. Is dealing with payroll actually stealing time from building your business? Are you finding yourself worrying more about state tax registrations and compliance than you are about your actual product or your team? If you're nodding along right now, yeah, you're definitely in the right place. And check this number out, because it's a big one. The IRS says that 40%, 40, of small businesses get hit with payroll tax penalties every single year. And here's the kicker. That problem gets so much worse the second you hire people in different states. That multi-state complexity, that's the real trap for companies that are trying to scale. Okay, let's be really clear. Gusto is a great product to start with. I mean, there's a reason over 400,000 small businesses use it. For a small team in one state, it's simple and it works. But there's this thing that people in the industry call the Gusto ceiling. And most fast-growing companies, they smash right into it somewhere between having 25 and 75 employees. So what does hitting that ceiling actually feel like? Well, first you realize that the compliance piece is actually outsourced. So when something breaks, Gusto just kind of points you to the state tax agency and suddenly you're the one stuck on the phone with them. Then the fees just start piling up. Every new state you hire in can cost you around $200 per form just to get registered. And when you really need help, you're stuck sending an email and just waiting. And that's a huge problem when you're up against a deadline. And this right here, this is the core problem. You get the scary-looking tax notice from some state you just hired in. It's got a 10-day deadline, you're freaking out. But your payroll provider's support team, they have a 24 to 48-hour turnaround time on email. That huge gap between how urgent your problem is and how fast they can respond, that's where founders lose time, money, and honestly, a whole lot of sleep. All right, so what's the solution? It's not just about finding another piece of software. It's really about changing how you think about payroll altogether. You've got to move from a do-it-yourself tool to a system that actually automates compliance and takes ownership of the problem. I absolutely love this quote because it just nails the difference in philosophy. See, Gusto gives you the software and the guides for you to manage everything. A platform like Warp, on the other hand, is built to be your compliance team, to actually do the work for you. And that's the whole ballgame, ownership. And this chart just makes it super clear. With Gusto, if there's a mistake, the liability, the penalty is on you. With Warp, it's on them. They pay for it, period. Those state registration fees, we're talking about $200 a pop on Gusto. With Warp, it's just included, totally automated. And support, you go from waiting a day or two for an email to getting a real human in just 5 minutes. It's a night and day difference. So what does this look like in the real world? It's actually incredibly simple. Step 1, you hire an amazing person, doesn't matter where they live. Step 2, Warp's AI agents just automatically register you with all the right state agencies. Step 3, if one of those tax notices ever shows up, their team just handles it for you. Which leads to step 4, you get to go back to doing your actual job, building your company. And you can see that Warp was really built from the ground up for this exact scaling journey. The pricing is super transparent. It's just per employee, so it doesn't get crazy expensive as you add new states. There are no annual lock-ins. You can switch over from Gusto in literally less than 10 minutes. Plus, you get a dedicated account manager included, and they can even handle paying your global contractors. It's like they made a checklist of every single pain point from Gusto and just solved it. Now look, Warp isn't the only other option out there. You're definitely going to hear about 2 other big names, Justworks and Deel. But it is so important to understand that they solve very different problems for very different kinds of companies. So first up is Justworks. They're what's called a PEO, a professional employer organization. This is a whole different model. Basically, with a PEO, they become the official employer of record for your team when it comes to taxes. And this lets them bundle everything, payroll, HR, and benefits all into one package. The main reason, and really the only reason a startup goes with Justworks is for one thing, getting access to those big company, enterprise-level health insurance plans. And look, if you're trying to hire engineers away from Google, that can be a big deal. But the trade-offs are pretty significant. It is very expensive. That whole co-employment thing can sometimes be a red flag for investors during due diligence. And it is way harder to break up with a PEO than it is to just switch payroll providers.
And let's make that cost feel real. For a 50-person team on their PEO Plus plan, you're looking at almost $5,500 a month. And get this, that's before you add the actual cost of the insurance premiums themselves. The numbers just add up so fast.
Okay, the other big alternative is Deel. Now, Deel's superpower is global hiring. They are the best-in-class employer of record, or EOR, which means they can act as the legal employer for your people in other countries. So if you're building a global first team and you need to hire in 150 different countries, they're your guys. But, and this is a really big but, their US payroll product is frankly an afterthought. If you look at reviews, users constantly talk about bugs and clunky workflows for their regular W-2 employees here in the States. Okay, I know that was a ton of information. So how do you actually pick the right path for your startup? Let's just boil this all down into a really simple, clear framework. It honestly just comes down to this. You should choose Warp if your team is mostly US-based, you're growing across multiple states, and you just want compliance handled for you. You should choose Justworks if getting those big company health benefits is your absolute #1 priority, and you're cool with the PEO model and its costs. And finally, you choose Deel if you are a global first company and your main headache is hiring full-time people all over the world. So I'll just leave you with this one question to think about. When you look at how you're dealing with payroll right now, are you just using a tool that puts all the risk and all the responsibility on your shoulders? Or do you have a partner that really acts like a part of your team, one that takes ownership and lets you get back to focusing on what really matters? The answer to that question, well, it'll tell you everything you need to know